There are a lot of tabletop RPGs out there to choose from, and today I would like to introduce you to one of my favorites, Genesys RPG, created by Edge Studios, formerly Fantasy Flight Games. You may recognize those names as the creators of the narrative dice Star Wars RPG, and if you've played that system before, Genesys should feel very, very familiar, as it's pretty much the spiritual successor to Star Wars. They play nearly identically, with the biggest difference being that Genesys works in any setting that you can imagine. Welcome to the Tabletop Empire, my name is Nate, and today I'm going to give you an overview of some of the mechanics and what makes Genesys a little bit different than any other system that you've maybe played before. And at the end, I'm going to share a big part of the game's philosophy and how it differs from other systems like Dungeons & Dragons. So this video is the first video of what I'm calling the Genesys Beginner's Guide series. Throughout this series, I'm going to be breaking down all of the core mechanics and rules for this game, so that way you, if you're a player or a GM, are able to learn the rules as quickly and as efficiently as possible. I might make a couple comparisons to Star Wars RPG along the way for anybody coming over from that system, but if you've never played either before, don't worry, I'll explain everything that you need to know. So the number one thing that sets Genesys apart from other systems like D&D is their narrative dice. These are proprietary dice that have symbols on them instead of numbers. And again, if you've played Star Wars RPG, these should look pretty similar because they're exactly the same. The only difference is new symbols because of licensing and all that. Now, I know it can be intimidating to look at these, but before you check out, just hear me out. These dice are amazing because they allow for everybody at the table to help shape the narrative, giving players the agency and opportunity to influence the story in small and massive ways. So instead of rolling a d20 against some number that you're unsure of that the DM has in their head, and then getting, let's say, a 15 and the GM tells you what happens because of that. In Genesys, you roll the ability dice based on your skills like athletics or stealth, and these ability dice have good symbols, and you will roll them alongside the difficulty dice determined by the GM, which have bad symbols on them. And then the player will roll their ability dice and the difficulty dice together. The positive and negative symbols will cancel each other out, and whatever is left over determines the success or result of the check. But these are interesting because they don't only determine whether you succeed or fail, but they also may give additional positive or negative effects. The symbols on these dice are success versus failure, advantage versus threat, and then triumphs and despairs. And because you have this kind of dual axis thing of success and failures and advantage and threats as separate parts of the results, you can get really interesting outcomes. Maybe you fail a perception check, but you rolled to advantage, so you find something else super helpful like a bag of gold. Or maybe you were successful on that computer's check, but you rolled a couple threat, so you just alerted the enemy to where you were currently hacking in from. But one of the neat things is that when a player rolls advantage, they actually get the final say in how to interpret that symbol, with GM moderation and approval, of course. And they can use that advantage to do something like give them better odds in their next check, or even shape the narrative in the world around them, depending on the amount of the advantage rolled. And then there are triumphs and despairs. Triumphs allow the players to make massive changes to the narrative in the scene, or a bigger bonus to their next check, while despairs can allow the GM to introduce some big complications to the scene. This system also has what are called story points, which also allow the players to do things like upgrade their dice rolls, activate special abilities, conveniently find something you need, and even introduce new narrative elements into the scene at any given moment during the session. Just another way that the players can actively help shape the narrative and the story. Another big difference from other systems like D&D is that unlike D&D, when you level up, and you get new spells based on your level, Genesys uses an XP progression system. At the end of each session, you will earn XP from the GM that you can use to spend on upgrading your skills or buying new abilities and talents. That may sound familiar if you're coming from Star Wars RPG, but there's still a pretty big difference. Unlike Star Wars RPG's preset talent trees, Genesys uses a build-your-own progression system with their talent pyramid. The book just contains a large list of talents you can choose from, and you just build your character's talent trees, starting with lower-tier talents and then stacking higher-tier talents on top of them. Once again, I'm going to cover this way more in depth when we get to character creation. And once again, a big bonus to Genesys RPG is that it works in any setting. The core book itself gives you 6 settings to use as a starting point: fantasy, steampunk, weird war, modern day, science fiction, and space opera. Though it is really easy to come up with your own ideas in your own settings because of just how easy it is to homebrew in this system. I've run one-shots where it was The Martian meets Alien meets Nemesis the board game in this kind of sci-fi horror setting that was really fun. Some other settings that I've run or played in or plan to run at some point: Betrayal at House on the Hill, a generic haunted house, Tron, a superhuman superhero one with like Spider-Man, one with the world of League of Legends, Runeterra. One of the ones I want to run most would be like a kitchen sink setting. That sounds like a lot of fun, but the list goes on and on. And this system just makes it really easy to play a game in any world that you can think of, with items, gear, and even skills being pretty easy to homebrew. The core rulebook also comes with everything that you need to start, with all the information on character creation, GM advice for how to play the game, tones for various settings, optional rules, building your own adventures, and more. There's also a couple Genesys setting expansion books that are available to purchase. So that's kind of just an overview of the system itself, but what about the game's actual design philosophy? How do the narrative tools that I went through earlier change the way that this game is played compared to other systems like D&D? The biggest adjustment coming to this game from something like Dungeons and Dragons is that this narrative dice system encourages players around the table to all get involved in shaping the narrative. I've heard a lot of people say that they don't like the narrative dice because as GMs, they feel like they have to come up with everything, and they don't like feeling like they have to come up with something creative and narrative for every single role. But this system's not D&D. All that isn't on the DM, and that's not how this system is supposed to work. Genesys works best when the entire table is collaborating, working together to interpret the dice results. Everyone at the table should be throwing out ideas as they have them for how to spend advantages or triumphs, with the player making the final decision of their dice results with the GM moderation. And honestly, one of the reasons I love this system so much is because of the control it gives the players. Again, some systems, like D&D, give players very little narrative control outside of their character's direct decisions. And some players may really like that. Other systems on the opposite end of that spectrum, like let's say Powered by the Apocalypse, can sometimes swing too far, in my opinion, in the other direction. And again, at least for players like myself, feel like they offer very little structure or not enough structure. In my opinion, Genesys strikes that perfect balance between those two extremes. It gives the players meaningful narrative influence, but still within a framework of rules and constraints. So that way that influence feels earned and not non-existent or unlimited. Another common criticism is that people say it takes a while to interpret the dice, and that each check takes a little bit longer. And honestly, yeah, I mean, that's true for the first few sessions, but as the group as a whole gets more comfortable with the system, you will get dramatically faster. And if you play online using a virtual tabletop that has all the dice and stuff built in, then it can do all of the symbol calculating and stuff for you immediately. Eventually, though, these dice just click, and once they do, you'll probably never want to go back to a numbered dice system again. If you would like to see this narrative dice system in action, you should check out our actual play, The Unnaturals, which uses mainly Star Wars, Force, and Destiny, but we're actually homebrewing a lot of Genesys rules into it because the systems just work so well together. And if you found this video helpful, blast a like, hit subscribe so you don't miss the next video in this series all about the dice. We're going to dive deep so that way you know everything that you need to know about them. And if you have any questions, drop them down in the comments below, or if you're a fan of Genesys or not, let me know why. I'd love to hear from you. A huge thanks to the Patreon supporters for also supporting this video. You all are awesome and amazing, and I'm so thankful for you. Thank you to everybody for watching. I will see you guys in the next video, but until then, and as always, may the Force be with you. Wait, hang on. This is Genesys, not Star Wars. Peace out? I don't know. I'll figure it out.